Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Seabass of WNWS of Jackson, Tennessee. This episode presented by our friends at Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Our news presented by Sutherland and Belk, an SEC sports-loving injury firm in Nashville. These guys will shoot you straight on your rights and options when you've been injured in an accident. Call them at 615-846-6200 to get your questions answered. You can also visit them online at sbinjurylaw.com. Congratulations to the Turner's Heroes Foundation. That is run by Vanderbilt tight end Cody Markle. That, of course, the foundation started in honor of former Vanderbilt tight end Turner Cockrell, who passed away last year. They raised money to benefit kids with cancer. They had a fundraising drive that concluded this week. They raised their goal of $50,000. Of course, you can still donate. We encourage you to do so. Go to turnersheroes.com to do that and to get more information. Our guest line today brought to you by our friends at Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for years. I would not trade them for anything. They are fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You have a guarantee you can return them within that window if you don't like them, but you're not going to want to. And once you get those sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code VANDY to get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us from WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee, as he does every week. He was at the LSU game on Saturday. He just got out of the doctor's office. My friend, welcome to the program. I got to ask you, what was more fun, the trip to the doctor or the trip to Nashville?
Ooh, well, we did go to Jimmy's right after the game. And my doctor's kind of hot, so it's close, and I really like her a lot. Man, I don't know. I'm going to go with Nashville just because of the Jenny's trip. There's just nothing like it.
That sort of sums up 2019. I was thinking the other day, here's what we've had this calendar year. We've covered a basketball team that went 0 for 20 in every attempt at a game in this calendar year. We have covered a football team that is winless heading into the last week of September. It did have a bye week, but still no wins to cover, and those losses have come by a total of 70 points. And in between, we covered a national championship baseball team that won everything in sight. So it has really been feast or famine.
It has, but I would point out, though, I mean, though we were hopeful, I mean, look, I don't think anybody's uber surprised that Vanderbilt's 0-3. You know, I mean, the best of expectations were 1-2, and the completely delusional were 2-1. You know, we weren't beating Georgia or LSU one way or the other. You know, this was really, to me, this starts, and look, yes, we got blown out, and that sucks, and I hate it. To me, the whole deal is about the Purdue game. That's where I'm hung up. So that's why, you know, that's why this game right here has the opportunity to be the catalyst for a turnaround that this season is absolutely still salvageable. The only thing I can tell you for sure, Chris, is that we will not be a part of the Final Four at the end of the season. And there's a pretty decent chance we're not winning the East. Other than that, all of our goals are still in place.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, and the thing I've said all along, you judge these games. I mean, the Purdue game was winnable. They didn't win. Purdue's worse than we thought. It's the look test, and I get nobody is judging them by should you have beaten LSU or Georgia. Of course not. I think it is fair to judge them by shouldn't you have at least looked good in one of those games, and they haven't.
Yeah. I mean that's fair. I mean, look, there have been a whole lot more disappointments in the first quarter poll than positive things. There have been a few things that look good. That drive to start the game against LSU, the first play of the game, that right there something to build on. I should have been excited leaving the stadium knowing we hung up 38 points on the LSU Tigers, but I also recognize that that's not the same accomplishment that it would have been last year. Defensively speaking, with LSU, they're not quite as stout as they were in previous years, but their offense is, good grief, their offense is a whole nother animal. It's amazing. Look, Chris, we certainly know the issues. I'm not going to spend this podcast talking about the issues this football team has, because we already know them all. The people that are taking time to listen to this podcast, they know what the issues for Vanderbilt football are. What I want to look at today is what can be done about it in regards to the Northern Illinois game. What have we seen? What do we see out of LSU that gives you reason to believe they win this game against a team? And let's face it, now one thing that I have heard you say, and it's been true, is that Derek Mason generally wins these types of football games, and I expect that to be the case Saturday as well.
He does, and I think that it's helpful when you look at his career to segment his performance against certain types of opponents. This, to me, seems to fit in that MTSU type opponent, although I think this team is probably better than the middle teams that he's beaten. Would you agree?
I'll say yes. Reputation-wise, yeah. Northern Illinois is all right. They've been kind of down over, where they had been. They're not what they were under, what was that coach's name a couple of years ago that was so solid for them? Joe.
The guy that was at Minnesota.
I was thinking it was like no.
Oh, Jerry Kill is who I'm thinking. I'm sorry. Yeah. Joe Novak. Yeah.
Yeah, not Jerry Kill. Yeah, Novak, and stuff like that. I don't think they're quite that type of team. I think they're a little bit better. I watched them against Nebraska. They're a team that Vanderbilt should frankly beat if they play their game. But, say if they play their game, I'm not really sure what our game is defensively. But I'm going to withhold judgment of the first three. I know what the first quarter poll looks like. But to me, it's all about these next three. How do they respond against by far the most winnable game they played on the season? Do they bounce back and win a game they're supposed to win? That's what it's all about for me right now. If I sit here and anchor down, pun intended, in the first three games and wallow in that, then there's no reason for me even to go Saturday and follow this, because it was an unmitigated disaster. But like I said, they have an opportunity here now. Look, this team should be able to move the football on the Huskies. Agreed? That shouldn't be in question. This offense should move the football. They get Devin Cochran back. I thought that the offensive line, it won't be mistaken for Georgia's, but I think some of the guys, especially getting their first opportunities and sometimes in different positions, I thought they played okay. I thought they've done a few things, and they certainly got some much-needed experience against top-flight SEC competition that I think will help them going forward in games like Northern Illinois this week.
Okay, give me a couple guys you've liked so far. Obviously, we know Keyshawn Vaughn, Kalijah Lipscomb, Jared Pinkney are good. Stay away from that, but give me some guys that you have really been surprised by their development.
Hey, before I get into the meat of it, one of them is Riley Gay. I've been very happy with that. I think we've all, except for a couple of years, and we held our collective breath when Vanderbilt kicks field goals. It's been pretty surprised, just pleasantly surprised so far. The punting, I've seen some couple of punts that I've really liked. I know some people have been critical in the first couple of weeks, but I think punting is better than I expected going into the season. Parker Tomey was fantastic last year. I expected a massive drop back, not being able to punt at all, and that's not really been the case. Punting's been pretty good. Let's see. Jalen Mahoney has to be one name. I think people believe that we've got enough opportunity to have a darn good football player here, and I agree. Guy who, and I'll only talk about one particular aspect of his game in regards to improvement, and it's something that I told you the other day, even before the LSU game, and that was that after what we saw in week number 1 against Georgia, shotgun snaps, I thought Grant Miller was just, I thought we were in trouble. I thought we were going to have to go under center. But I got to tell you, I think in a small amount of time, I think Grant Miller has done a much better job of snapping the football. I feel like Tyler Steen has played pretty well for the most part. I thought that Jonathan Stewart, who, by the way, even in the bridge, you can see how massive that dude is. I thought he held his own for the most part. You know, I will say this. I have not been overly impressed in the last game, maybe with our transfer corners. Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect him to come in and be, you know, Jimmy Williams. I didn't expect him to come in and do the type of things that you would hope they do from one year to the next, so that the transition from good grief. Oh, come on, help me out, Chris.
Big Ten. The big transition from the Big Ten?
No. Unfortunately, I have gone insane, and I have
losing Juwan Williams. Is that what you meant?
Williams.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Gee, Juwan, I am sorry. Trust me, I know who you are. You know, I'm not expecting them to come in and beat that, but good grief, they were getting burned Saturday. Just burned for no particular reason. I mean, I get it. LSU's passing game's fantastic. And when the quarterback can sit there for 47 minutes with no worry about any type of pass rush, most quarterbacks will pick you apart. But I haven't been in love with the coverage. But there have been a few bright spots, that I thought were pretty good. And some of the ones that I've mentioned are named. What about you? Who are some of the names that you've been impressed with so far?
Well, Mahoney grades well every week in Pro Football Focus. So that's one. I mean, to come in as a true freshman and not just be lost at defensive back, it's a challenge in this league. So he not only has not been lost, he's graded well. And not well under the circumstances, well, period. So that's one thing. I think Davion Davis being able to play as much as he has and starting this week is a good development. Again, defensive line might even be harder to play as a true freshman in the SEC. The fact that he's not wilted and has done okay at times, I think, is a positive. Offense, Pro Football Focus has not graded them well for the most part on the offensive line. Some guys have done well in bits and pieces, but again, we thought that would be a disaster. I'm kind of with you on everything else. The corners have not played well. And really, Cam Watkins was his Pro Football Focus grades, and they're not everything. I get it. We're always in the low to mid 60s, which is about what they had. So based on that, there wasn't a whole lot of reason to think they were going to be a lot better. Now, you need that body for sure. And if he's the best you've got, then he's the best you have, and it's worth the scholarship. But I don't know if people's expectations were higher maybe than they should have been, but they've not been good, as you said, at corner. I want to ask you a question, though. I want to circle back to offensive line because you played on the line of scrimmage, albeit the defensive line in college.
No. I was offensive line.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were defensive line. Well, that's even better. Okay, knowing that, let's say, for argument's sake, and I think this will be the case, if they get Devin Cochran back this week, knowing the linemen, knowing their skill sets, how would you line everybody up? Where would you go with guys the whole game? Where would you rotate? I want to hear what you would do if you were Cam Norcross.
Golly, Bill, what would my rotation be?
Yeah, and would you just say, play Cochran every snap unless it's a blowout? I mean, not only I want to know what you would do at every position. Would you tag team the guards like they have? Would you have Devin Cochran at left tackle? I presume you would. What would you do with Tyler Steen now? What would you do with Jonathan Stewart? Now that you have all these parts, what would you do with them ideally?
I could come up and say something easy, get your 5 best linemen on the field. And that's true. But at the same time, let's start first with Devin Cochran. Now, there's a couple of different ways to look at this. He hasn't played yet, and so you want to get him up to speed. But at the same time, this is a perfect opportunity to do so before you start facing SEC-level competition. I'm not worried about the edge against Northern Illinois with Devin Cochran, but I think I need him to get as many reps as he can possibly handle before he straddles into SEC play. Now, you'll have to forgive me. because I don't have the schedule in front of me. Is UNLV next, or is it an SEC game?
Oh, it's at Ole Miss next weekend, and then UNLV.
Yeah, I mean, look, if I can get the whole game out of him, then I'm going to play, because I'm definitely going to need that next week, And if he's up for it, then let him go. If he's clear and if he's good to go, then he's good to go. But I need to catch him up on game reps. So I know a lot of the thought might be, let's ease him in and make sure he's okay. If he's cleared and he's ready, then he's ready. Now he's 3 games behind, and I get all that, but it's not going to help him playing, a third of that game and then getting ready to go down to Oxford. You know what I'm saying? So if he's ready, then he needs the reps. They need to be his. You agree with that?
Yeah, my question is, do you put him back at left tackle where he was the incumbent starter, or do you leave Jonathan Stewart there and move Cochran back to right where he played last year? I think I know my answer. I just want to hear what you say.
I mean, the thing about Stewart is you get all the length that you get with Devin Cochran. I'm not sacrificing length by switching from one to the other. If I were to do so with, let's say if I were switching, Steen with him or something like that, Stewart has all the length, maybe more. Who knows? From that standpoint, I'm not missing anything there. Ideally, Chris, what I would really love to do, I would really love to see. But, I can't do that because Tyler hasn't played bad football. Tyler Steen has not played bad football, and he doesn't deserve to not be starting. But just from a length standpoint, I would love to have those book tackles be Jonathan Stewart and Devin Cochran, because that frame-wise and length-wise, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody that had, better tackles than that. Doesn't make them better players, but just from that standpoint. But I think Tyler Steen has earned the opportunity to stay where he's at. If nothing else, the experience that Jonathan Stewart got, the one thing that we did not think we had at all coming into the start of the season was depth at tackle. And I'm not going to go so far to say that we definitely have that. But what we do have is 2 or 3 tackles who we would probably feel comfortable again playing against the Ole Misses of the world, playing against the Tennessees and the Kentuckys of the world, and it'd be good enough to get the job done. So, yeah, I mean, I think I leave everybody where they're at.
I'm looking at Pro Football Focus grades right now. Steen is grading as a run blocker 73.6 and 49.4 as a pass blocker. Now, having said that, those aren't the coach's grades. Those are not reflective of maybe assignments that the staff knows, that the independent grader who's doing that for Pro Football Focus knows. But having said that, let's say that's in the ballpark. Tyler Steen's skill set is as a run blocker. So that's more of a thing you need inside, especially at the guards, where they are not really very good on the left side right now a lot of days. Sage Young is kind of what he is at this point. He performs at just an okay level when he plays, and the rest of the time he's hurt. So he's a freshman, so you've got an opportunity to get him experience. Do you move him inside? And if so, how hard is it to move a guy from right tackle to left guard at this time of the season? And maybe you don't move him to left guard. Maybe you move him to right guard and play Cole Clemens on the left side. So at least you keep him on that side of the ball. I'm asking you because you played it. You know how tough these things are. I mean, I'm thinking ideally, yeah, he's got a skill of this, but I don't know how hard that is to do because I haven't had to do it.
I think it's pretty hard. Now, I didn't have to go from left guard to right tackle, but I understand the difference in it. I mean, it's a completely different position that utilizes certain aspects of your anatomy and your strengths. So I mean, that's why when you find linemen who have such position versatility. One thing I love about the young man that, and he's at Tennessee, and sorry, Vanderbilt fans, but this is the one ball that I do like because I call this young man's game, and I've known him for a long time. He's a really good guy, and that's Trey Smith. Now, not only was he dominant at left tackle, he's got the position versatility that makes him good at all five positions. He played all five, and he can do it at a high level without much. He can go from left guard to right tackle, and everything translates. Most offensive linemen can't do that. So yes, it can be a very real issue because you may have a super strength, but then let's say like you mentioned with Tyler, he's an outstanding run blocker. But what happens when you need help off that left defensive edge? And he's grading out at under 50. You got your protections have to switch a little bit. What if you could have somebody that was a little bit better than that and do just exactly what you said? Accentuate the strengths of Tyler, which is clearly run block him, move him inside. That makes sense to me. My question to you would be, if you could, and let's say we live in a world where you trust. Well, you know what? I think we do live there. I mean, if you can trust Jonathan Stewart, even if it's a game against like LSU, to man the left tackle, then you can trust him to man for the right tackle. Let me ask you this: would this be your ideal scenario for your top five potential wise? Would you go Jonathan Stewart at left tackle? Would you go Devin Cochran at right? Devin Cochran at left tackle, Jonathan Stewart at right tackle. Let's say Tyler Steen at right guard, Cole Clemens at left guard, and Grant Miller at center.
That was exactly what I was thinking, because at least if you move Steen from tackle to guard, you can move him inside to the same side, so at least you keep him on the right side. Maybe that's a little bit easier. Again, I'd lean on you for the answer as to how easy that is, but that is what I was thinking before I asked you the question.
But you got to remember something else, especially in places when you have to start pulling and whatnot. If you have a dominant leg, because just like you're right-handed, you're also right-footed, right? You get that when you get that push and the drop. That dominant leg is a lot easier than it is because you're doing it the opposite direction. You know what I mean? If, like, let's say you've been doing it on one side, you got that dominant leg, you got to get out there and pull, and I take that first step and get that power push off of my weaker leg. Maybe I'm a tenth of a second slower, and that's the difference between me getting that block and not getting. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you another question.
Ask me another question.
Do you go with what you think right now is the best long-term answer and let guys learn through the growing pains, which, by the way, worked better than we thought it would through 3 games? Or,
I think,
or do you wait to the bye week and sort of kind of do status quo and then spring the whole thing on after, which would be what? Their bye week is after Missouri, which that comes – Missouri's October the 13th, so the bye week would be the 20th. So I guess my question is, how aggressive do you become about doing that now? How much do you wait?
Well, that's a great question because, if you have the opportunity to put your best foot forward, wouldn't you do it every time you take the field? Is one way to think about it. This team has issues that need to be fixed immediately, so that might be the way that I go, which to me also happens to be the best long-term answer. I think the best short-term answers for Vanderbilt are also probably the best long-term answers, because I don't know some of these younger players and if they're close or whatnot, they're not playing simply because they're true freshmen or whatever the case may be. But for this season, that lineup that I just gave you, I think is probably your best chance at max potential.
Here's one more thing I want to throw out there, too, and I've mentioned this before, but Steen was versatile enough to move from the offensive line to the defensive line last year and actually give them a few snaps. I would have to think whatever they do with him on the offensive line, even if it was moving him from right tackle to left guard, right now would be easier than what they asked him to do a year ago. So I think you may have a case where you've got maybe an outlier of a kid in that sense.
No doubt. If for no other reason, then you're dealing with a completely different coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And let's just face it. You know this. You've covered enough college football to know. You will spend the absolute majority. Yes, you scrimmage. Yes, you do 7-on-7 and things like that. But you will spend the majority of your playing career with your position coach. You know, those offensive linemen spend so much more time with Cam Norcross than they ever will with Derek Mason or with Jerry Godowski. I mean, obviously when they're together as a full offense, but they spend their bulk. That's where their connection is with Cam Norcross, as it should be. Whoever the position is, whatever the coach is. I mean, for me, my position coach was the greatest coach I ever had. I learned more from him. I interacted more with him. I didn't care for my offensive coordinator or my head coach the way I did him. And so it's not just the position itself, but it's a whole different room that you're working with. Because the truth is, and a lot of teams. Now, I can't speak for Vanderbilt, but like the offensive linemen, for the most part, that's who they're going to hang out with. They're running around with the secondary. I mean, it happens, but you run around with the people that you sweat and you got that sweat equity with, and you're in those film sessions and all these other things, and that's how we had it broken down as in position, and so to just, I mean, it's not so easy just to jump over the other side of the ball. You know what I mean? You're dealing with something completely different. So I think that yes, it would be much easier for him to go inside from tackle to guard than it would to switch back to defense, and like he had to last year. He's a decent offensive lineman. He run blocks well. We need all those we can get. I'll take him, and I'll let my defensive line be built through the Derek Greens and the cats like that, and the young man that good grief, man, the young man
Malik Langham. Yeah.
Langham. I'm sorry, Chris. I'm sorry. I know these people sitting in a Kroger doing this.
No, that's okay. The NCAA apparently forgot him too. So,
which is crap, and they ought to be ashamed of themselves. To be real honest with you, and don't give me this crap about it. They got so much to do. That's a 5-minute decision, Chris. That's a 5-minute decision. They've had all the information they've needed for months, and all they got to do is say yes or no. It's pitiful to leave a kid like that hanging on a string for no particular reason.
Let's make a clean sweep through the rest of the offensive line just so we hit everything here, because maybe there's a storyline or two here that we need to discuss we've not gotten to, and then I want to get to the mailbag so I can get you out of here in a few minutes. But, okay, the true freshman, my understanding was Julian Hernandez might have a shot to play from somebody I spoke to near the end of fall camp. Who knows? He could get some snaps later, but I would think that Fitzgerald's below him, obviously. He's just learning to play football. The kid from BA, Nate Clifton, I think was behind Hernandez. So if a true freshman plays from here on, last I heard, it was probably going to be Julian Hernandez, who actually looked pretty good from what I'm told, and Clifton did too, from what I've been told. But obviously those kids are not deemed ready to play. Carlton Lorenz, I don't think will ever play a meaningful snap for them. He's not the 6'4", 290 they've advertised. They're scout team guys that run reps ahead of him. So I think we can sort of count him out at this point. Jonah Buchanan has never played a snap on the offensive line. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Let's see. From there, we saw Rowan Godwin in the opener for 5 snaps. Didn't play particularly well. We've not seen him since. I think you can probably count him out.
Yeah. Count him out.
So let's see who's left at this point. We've got
Bailey.
Dan Dawkins, Bryce Bailey,
Sean McMoore,
who hasn't played yet due to injury, but it sounds like he may be back, and I think that's it. Excuse me if I'm leaving somebody out. I will scan the list, but that's what you've got left. Where do you use those guys, and how often do you use them?
Man, I saw the Godwin deal. I'm not expecting much there. Man, how about this? Let's just pray for health for the rest of the year. McMoore certainly has to be one of those options. With Hernandez, now obviously, especially with camp being closed, I haven't had a chance to see him playing or practicing in a Vanderbilt uniform. You know what I will say to you, though, Chris? Right now, 40% of our starting offensive line played at St. Thomas right now.
Yeah.
I think he's the 3rd offensive lineman in that room that is from St. Thomas.
That's crazy.
And I don't think that's by accident, though, Chris. I mean, they play the elite of the elite. They're completely coached up by the time they get there. They know all about a weight program, so the transition is shorter for guys like that. I mean, even if they're not the cream of the crop at St. Thomas, they're still much more prepared to play college football at an early point than some of the others who are coming from whatever county, and whatever city school, whatever like that. A place like St. Thomas gets you ready for that. That's one thing that I will say about Coach Mason the last couple of years. It seems to me like they've made some of those bigger programs and going after kids like that, like getting Jordan Butler, the kid that hopefully they can hold on to from IMG, getting cats out of schools like that. To me, I think is a very, very big deal because they're ready to play at a much quicker rate than some of those other guys. Not always. That's not always the case, but I don't think it's any accident that in a time when we need offensive linemen, that 40% of our starting line comes from St. Thomas Aquinas. And so maybe Julian is the next in the line to sit there. But as far as just like plug in offensive linemen, we don't have that type of depth, but these are things that we knew going into the season. We knew that before the season started. If there's a guy that I'm thinking can come in off the bench and maybe do something, I guess McMoore or Bailey, I guess, or Hernandez, one of those three. I mean, we're just not really in a position where we can eat up a bunch of personnel losses. I mean, with a couple of injuries here and there, and we are in big fat trouble.
So do you not trust Dawkins yet, or did you just forget about him?
I didn't forget about him. I mean,
you're just saying you would go with, well, let's say, okay, if we decided our ideal starting lineup would be Cochran at left tackle, Stewart at right tackle, Clemens at left guard, Steen at right guard, and Miller at center. So that leaves the guys that have played a lot so far. The remaining snap leader would be Bryce Bailey, followed by Dan Dawkins, followed by Sage Young. Or Sage, and I don't mean to bag on the kid. I'm not trying to do that at all. Sage eliminates himself about half the time through injuries. He just never has stayed healthy. When in doubt, I kind of go with the younger guy, and Bailey has played some different spots. He's played some tackle. Right now, to me, he's sort of their sixth man.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. This is not a strong suit for us, and I'm hopeful over the next couple of classes that they absolutely load up on the offensive line position because it's very necessary for us.
No, it's not a strong suit, but it's. I have to say this. I think the outlook, just because of numbers now, just because you have played X amount of guys, they've been in there and they've seen what it's like, and you've got to do that before the light clicks on. I just keep falling back on that as an encouraging development.
Yeah, and I'll certainly agree with that. Now, I want to say one thing before because then I need to go to the mailbag because I got to get out of here, Chris. But look, and I understand that it was LSU, and maybe I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it. I have a skewed view of it, but we haven't really talked about this that I remember. Maybe we haven't. I don't remember this. But Chris, is it me, or do we look size-wise like a Conference USA football team? I mean, I get it, it's Georgia, I get it, it's LSU, but I look at these offensive lines, even of teams that we're not playing, but I'm watching play in other games, and they just look so much bigger and more physical than us. It doesn't really matter who I'm talking about. If it's A&M, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, even Tennessee and teams like that. I mean, even the ones that we have shot at beating, they just look so much bigger and more physical than us. How do you feel about our weight program right now?
Well, I don't see it on the offensive line so much. I mean, I think they're pretty good sized across that. No, they don't have the 343-pound behemoth of a left guard like LSU does. And I give them a pass on that because most teams don't. So the offensive line has never bothered me. I feel like in terms of size, they are always, adequate there. Defensive line, I've never thought they've had that. I mean, the closest they got was Franklin. I remember watching Malik Langham in practice and just thinking, okay, this kid finally looks like the kind of SEC defensive lineman that everybody else has 11 or 12 of the top level programs in the SEC, and he's one of maybe 2 or 3 on that side of the ball, I would certainly agree that that's never been. I mean, look, the thing is, linemen in that defense have got to hold their gaps and let the linebackers make the plays. That's just never really been how it's gone down, maybe with the exception of the Butler-Cunningham tandem.
That's right, and there's no doubt about that. And see, look, I'm very patient with that side because the truth is that next year that team that unit can roll out, Dio. They can roll out Derek Green, Davion Davis, Jordan Butler, and Malik Langham, and that's a very, very different look than I have ever seen, personnel-wise, out of our defensive line on the collective. I've never seen us have anything like that I can remember.
Well, the DiNardo years when they had the Manley and the other kid from Boykin from Alabama, they had some dudes back then, but it's the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I mean, this is just not normally what we do, but those names that I just mentioned, those are big bodies. Those are long, big SEC-looking bodies. Those aren't 245, 50-pound guys that we got to pack 37 pounds on, and hopefully that translates. They got it already coming in. We don't generally have a lot of that. And I'm not talking about big, fat cows, because some of the cats that I'm talking about that they got the size you're talking about, they move like the 240. That's what we need. I think on paper, next year's defensive line unit, from a stuff standpoint, has a chance to be by far, and it's not even close, the most improved unit on that football team from this year to next.
Well, and like Davion Davis is a big upgrade, but he's 6'2", 302. At LSU and Georgia, that kid is 6'4", 320 or 330, with the same sort of athleticism. That's always what they're going to be up against, but that one is a step in a better direction.
But I will take that over 270, and 280, that are outmanned. And it's not that they're bad football players, they're just overwhelmed. We need people who aren't going to get overwhelmed, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think we have great linebackers or anything like that, but it sure would be nice to see what they can do when they don't have a defensive lineman's butt stuck in their face, 5 yards off the ball.
Okay, I got to ask you this before we go to the mailbag, and it'll be a short mailbag, by the way. Outside linebackers again, what the heck? I mean, not outside, inside. What in the world are you seeing there from a schematic and execution standpoint?
Nothing. I mean, that sounds like a stupid response, but nothing. Nothing at all. I don't even know what to say at this point. It's what are you saying? Because I'm just zero production. Well, I don't know how else to put zero production. What are you seeing?
I mean, I just go back to the fact that when I watched those guys out of high school and saw the rankings, that was one of their more talented places. I mean, they only have to have 3 or 4 guys who can play, and I thought, well, man, if there's any spot on the field where they've got that, that's where it ought to be. I just don't know what the explanation is. I mean, is it possible these guys were just completely overrated? Sure. When Derek Mason talked about, well, guys need to learn to trust each other, they try to basically be somewhere other than when they're supposed to be because they're worried about other guys not executing. Well, maybe that's what he was talking about. I don't know, but I look at them and I go, well, let's see. Let's look at the linebacker group. Who would you be covering for? If you're Dimitri Moore, I wouldn't think you're covering for the senior beside you in Caleb Peart, although Caleb moved inside. But again, if Caleb has to move from outside to inside at this point, that's an indictment on your group. And you've had guys that have been in your system for 2, 3, 4 years now. I look on the outside. Hebert is a redshirt junior. Mintz is a redshirt junior. So they should know where to be and what to do. So the guys in front of them, you got Birchmeyer and Tidd are redshirt juniors. Well, again, they should know where to be and what to do. So does it mean maybe that they just don't trust those guys physically to do their job? Maybe, but if it's from a I don't trust my teammate on where he should be, I don't get it, because all those guys around him, he's been playing with, they've all been playing with each other for 2, 3, 4 years. I'm at a loss too, because I'm with you. I just don't see anything there that excites me. And and that's being kind.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know how at this point, I don't know how to fix it. If you're asking me how to fix it, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, a lot of it's personnel, but it's not all that. The totality of the defense right now is, I mean, I don't know what I'm building around defensively. What if I were to say, okay, Chris, the strength of because we ranked the units before the season started. Where's the strength of the defense? It's sidelines, I guess. And at this point, I'm not trying to mock or make fun. It's just they don't really do anything well.
No, they don't. I mean, the best player so far, according to Pro Football Focus, is Jalen Mahoney, who I didn't think was going to get on the field.
Which is excellent for him, because he looks like he's going to be a really good football player, but it's an indictment on the rest of that unit. So
yeah,
they need to pick it up, no question. And again, from a physicality standpoint, that's about to go down. I mean, look, they still have plenty of teams who are certainly capable, but they played the two biggest, most physical teams they'll play by far all year already.
Well, and so, one of the reasons I like to ask you, because you played the game, and again, I did, and I don't like to try to make judgments out of my league. Now, I can look at a team and say that defense is bad because you're giving up points and yards, but when it gets into digging into the whys and stuff, if they're not bringing pressure, playing their corners way off the ball or something like that, those are things easily identifiable. But in terms of the whys of the rest, I mean, there's certain times that I know who people are who post on the board, and I don't out posters, but there's a couple guys with coaching backgrounds and stuff like that I've talked to them before and know who they are. And when those guys start saying stuff like your scheme's too complicated and they look confused, that's bad when you're confusing your guys, but you're not confusing the other guy. I'm just taking those guys at their word that they know what they're doing and what they're talking about, and I think they do. But that's the thing that's jumped out to me is like, why is it they can confuse, if that is true, why is it that they can confuse their own guys but not the others?
Yeah, I mean, and a couple of things that, like, when they got beat a couple of times on big plays against LSU, remember one of the formations that I think they had two backs in the backfield, they ended up, sending them in motion towards the sideline. And I said, oh, my, and they took the DB with them. I said, oh, my goodness, man, they are fixing to run a slant right here. And when they do, there's not going to be anybody in that middle, and he's going to get to the house. And Chris, that's exactly what happened. They moved that cat right out of there, and that slot receiver just slanted right there and caught that ball. I know you know what I'm talking about. And there was just no one there because they couldn't get inside on the slant. And all you have to do is at that point you make the throw, and you're in the house. And then of course it was Headlight City after that. It's just little stuff like that. Look, every one of those coaches on that staff know 1,000 more times about football than I ever will. I haven't played the game in 25 years. But some things are, some things aren't overly complicated, and we're making them that way.
Well,
and I'm not real sure why.
A couple times there were more bad angles on a play than there are in a botched geometry problem. But the other thing that's obvious to me is they're just not fast enough on the back end.
And I agree with that, but I mean, the thing that everybody I was in the bridge on Saturday, but the thing that I kept hearing everybody say, and I saw a few people talking about it, Chris, and then after this, I have to go. I'm already way behind. Was how far off the ball they were playing. The cushion that they were giving, and Joe Burrow's looking at it, and he's like, okay. All right. Now, see, here's the thing, and they're saying, well, that's not what we did. Well, but the results say that's exactly what you did, because that's what LSU saw, and they sure enough took advantage of that. The only problem is even when they got up close to press, they were still getting beat. So it's like darned if you do and if you darned if you don't. But whether they sagged off, whether they came up close to the line of scrimmage, our DBs were religiously getting beat by a far superior passing attack to our secondary. Now I think you're going to find that they're going to do that to a lot of people. I don't know where we stack up defensively compared to Texas, but they did the same thing to Texas, Chris. They moved up and down the field all night long, and nobody's been able to stop them yet. And I have a feeling that's going to continue throughout the year. That's not an excuse for our secondary, because I think there's plenty of passing attacks left that can burn our butts. But they got beat just about every possible way. And then you add in the fact that, look, that offensive line, you really think you're getting to Joe Burrow with 4 people? It's not happening. It is not happening. We don't have a defensive lineman that was better than any of their offensive line. So, man, I don't care if you got to roll, you got to stunt, you got to confuse and send numbers, whatever you got to do. And now, look, I'm not one of those people, blitz, because that's not always the answer. But Joe Burrow could have sat back and ate a meatloaf sandwich with a couple of those if he wanted to, and still have time to make that throw. And we went in, think about this, Chris. We went into that football game as the only team in the country that didn't have a sack. Now, we got one. I think we might even got 2 in that game. But we're just going to have to find a way to get some pressure somewhere. Even our best pass rushers are being neutralized one-on-one. They don't need help. Nobody has to chip for them. No back really has to worry about protecting the quarterback, and we don't worry. When's the last time, Chris, you saw somebody walking up in an A-gap blitz and overloading the A-gap right there?
Oh, I don't. Does it ever happen?
I don't. I'm not saying it hasn't, but I can't recall a single time, Chris. Now, ask me give me the mailbag question, because, man, you're getting me killed here.
I'll make the question quick, but the A-gap blitz, that was like a Woody Woodenhofer special from what I remember.
Well, pressure right up the middle, man. You get pressure up the middle, man, and you're going to win games. There's no question about it. That destroys everything when you can get pressure up the middle.
Yeah, that's when you start to see the look of panic in the quarterback's eyes. Okay, mailbag question. This will be a quick hitter. It is sponsored by my friend Josh Minton. He's an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. Call him 615-933-1979. Tell him you heard about it on the show. Call Josh, get a free quote. You've got nothing to lose. He's a great dude. Mr. Vandy says, do you think the game Saturday is one of the most important games in Coach Derek Mason's tenure, considering the expectations going into the season?
No, not really. And when I say that, Chris, tell me what you think. That game couldn't possibly define him. Him winning that game can't possibly define it. He can't win it by enough. He can't win it by small enough. Now, the only definition would be if he were to crap the bed and lose this football game. But winning this football game here by 66 or by 2, is that really going to be the definition of the Derek Mason era? No. Is it the most critical game? No, not even close. I don't think.
No, I think if he wins, it doesn't really mean anything. I think if he loses, given the attendance and just the general negativity from the fan base. Now, I've said all along, I think that he's really secure, but there's been a lot of secure coaches that have been secure, and then you lose games you're not supposed to lose, and you have nobody in the stands. And there is a point at which an AD has no choice. I'm not suggesting we're there yet. Again, my stance has been, even when this was before he won 2 games last year against Ole Miss and Tennessee. It was very clear to me that he was safe for a couple more years, but there are extreme circumstances under which there is a breaking point, and I think that I don't want to engage the topic unless it happens, but hypothetically speaking, that might get a little bit more interesting.
Maybe so, and your point is valid at most places. I don't know it exists at Vanderbilt, unless things are different now. Now, let me say this. I got the opportunity for the first time Saturday at the football game to meet Malcolm Turner. First of all, that dude works out. that dude's put together. You better believe that. Secondly, I really try to pay attention to people when I'm speaking to them, and that dude's attentive. You know what I mean? You can tell when somebody's looking at you, but they're not really listening to what you're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That dude was locked in. I mean, he didn't have to. I mean, I ain't nobody. And he absolutely was attentive, and he looked at me right now. I said, "Hey, man, I mentioned you and doing the podcast with you and doing the show here in Jackson, and how if I can help him out in any way, I'd be glad to do so, and all this other stuff." And he listened intently and talked to me man to man, eye to eye, and I knew that I was talking to somebody who meant what they were saying and was attentive to what I was saying. That's important to me. It wasn't a bunch of lip service. He was an impressive dude. He's got a big fat job ahead of him. This program is in shambles again, and the season is not written. It's not over with. This could end up being a 6-win season, 7-win season. Who knows? I doubt 7, but it could be a 6-win season if things go right. I get all that, but look, even if that happens, we've got issues right now that almost nobody else has to face. You've seen the attendance. The morale is at a low right now. There's no doubt. I think we might have the right guy in charge at the top in Malcolm. He's going to need to be able to do what he needs to do to get the job done. But this being a defining game for Derek Mason, as I said, and as you reiterated, unless he loses, no. A win doesn't do anything here one way or the other. But a loss to Northern Illinois after all this, and basically guaranteeing you that nobody's coming in any of the games henceforth or the rest of the season, that could do something. But even then, I doubt it.
All right, my friend, tell people where they can find your show, where they can find you on Twitter, and anything else you want to throw out there.
You can find me currently at the Kroger parking lot on University in Jackson, Tennessee. You can find me online at Cheap Seats Bass on Twitter, at Cheap Seats Bass. You can find my show at WNWS.com or 101.5 in Jackson, Tennessee. Chris Lee.
Thanks, my friend. He's Seabass. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. We'll catch you again next week.